Thank you, Latif Tayour. I'm so excited to talk to you. I was I was texting you from my computer, and my computer saves like all of the text from all time. And I was noticing that the last time we texted was when you had my notebook that I left at your show from July 24th. I guess it would have been 2019. I think. And then you were nice enough to like engage with me in multiple texts when I was like traveling and whatever else. And you did get me my notebook. I think you left it at Bert's. So
Nice.
I wouldn't have thought that so many aspects of that would be like a romp through comedy history, because all of it seems like the traveling, the Bert's, your show, although I think you're doing shows, but perhaps in a different iteration. But in any event, thank you for my notebook. Thank you for having me today. And I am excited to talk about whatever has become of comedy since that last text exchange.
It is a weird time because like everything about our lives has changed, and there's like a clear before and after period. And when you see glimpses of your old life, you're like, what was that like?
Yeah. Right. Like when having a small notebook that I would carry around with me was such an essential aspect of my work life that really it was like a loss. Whereas now, I mean, I've got like my computer and, everything's just this like kind of home setup for the most part. But yeah, there is such a difference for sure.
Yeah, on the podcast here, I tend to only have people I know. Like I haven't ventured into people like that I don't know yet. I'm sure it'll happen. Like someone will want to be on it that I don't know, and I'll say okay. But everyone so far is people I know. And then, so I just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's like, oh, I just think of a person or someone texts me and then I ask them. And how I got to you was I was reading the Wall Street Journal. I'm like,
oh, you just read it casually?
I read it every day. And then I'm like, oh, there's Liz. Liz should be on the podcast.
I love that that's the way. Because I have been aware of your podcast. I've texted you about episodes of your podcast that I've listened to and enjoyed. I think one that we texted about was Neil Nanda's, which I thought was so great. But I think so that makes sense because, it's show business and the Wall Street Journal is about business. But I love that that's how you got to it.
Yeah, I just re-triggered it. And then so I was like, let me see if she wants to do it. And
of course.
It was a great article because it showed like the career transition into comedy, which I also did. I went from music to finance to comedy, and you went from lawyering. I'm sure that's not a word.
Yeah.
Is that a word?
People definitely
lawyering?
Use it. Yeah.
So you went from lawyering to comedy, and I have to say, not just any lawyering. Like we're talking like Ivy League, Penn, University of Chicago lawyering.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. That's true.
I mean, pat yourself on the back. I mean, come on. That's like...
Yeah. And I guess like, I don't mean, and I'm always like a little self-conscious, I guess in general, but like specifically about prestige stuff, because I don't know, like it was so ingrained in me. I think you're a child of immigrant descent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Half. Yeah.
Okay. Same, actually.
One. Yes. One.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Right. And for me, I guess it is both my mom and my dad, but my dad was like far more obviously of immigrant descent in the sense that he had a thick accent and, it sort of seemed, I guess like the sitcom-y version of it is like kind of seemed grandpa-like more than dad-like.
Right.
I guess because of ingrained xenophobia that crosses over to ageism. I don't know. But like, whatever it is, he and my mom, even though my mom, while technically an immigrant, seems like a New Yorker, like grew up on Long Island and whatever, but she technically was born in a displaced persons camp in Rome. And so they're both like children of Holocaust survivors, very immigrant mentality. And so I say all of that, and this was like in part covered in the article, because they really had this thing where it's like, you gotta have a profession. Like, and it's dire. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, the quote that I've said as a joke and that was in the article is that, like, I think that my parents thought the Nazis would come to our house specifically if I specifically didn't graduate from law school. And like, that's the extent of, I guess like the pressure to go to a good school and go to a good law school and like all this stuff. And I'm very thankful for it, like for, financial, practical reasons, but also because I get that in the same way that like I have certain strong beliefs about, what's important to me and what I might pass on to kids, if I'm lucky enough to do so or whatever. So too, my parents did what they thought was the best. And I guess I get that I don't totally get why that was the thing. Like, and so all of this to say that the reason that I get somewhat self-conscious about like prestige stuff is I'm like, listen, I was dealing with a lot of pressure and this is why I did it. And it was important to me. And I think like, I get it, but I see that there's like such intense pressure on kids to perform. And now that I do comedy and acting and creative writing of all different varieties, there's such an element where I see the negative effects of the kind of like, I guess, like left-brained, like it's really important to get it right kind of mentality. Yeah. That I think like when it's at least possible, I'm not offering that like I'm not saying I know the answer to this, but like I do think there's some validity to the theory that if you're really good at school and you're really good at performing in a way that like the Wall Street Journal and other people's parents at Rosh Hashanah think you're impressive, it may also be true that you could be really afraid to fail, and that some of the elements of getting going in a creative career are hard, and I think that for me, because I mean, I feel like to some degree, I hit kind of a stride in a recent like past, like with winning Boston, and I don't know, just sort of finding my voice a little bit. Although now I'm like, I think I found my voice and it's always yelling, but like, I definitely went through a lot of time as a comedian when I was like really sort of trying too hard in a specific way. I mean, everybody has their version, I think, of like the hard part where you're not quite sure what your voice is. And I don't mean to say that I've like for sure found mine. But I think that my specific journey was maybe informed by all the like good school, good student kind of stuff, where it's like I really was afraid to be, I don't know, bold.
Did it make it more sticky to be like, because you're like, if you went to like, let's call it like a third tier law school and you're doing law like farmers insurance, I don't know even know if that's a thing, but like, could you just be like, I'm out of here, this sucks? But like, since like you're so much more invested, was it like harder to be like, but I did it so perfectly this other way? Did it like delay you at all, or that wasn't part of your thinking?
No, it didn't. And I guess like, that it's an interesting question. It's hard for me to answer it because, I mean, which isn't to say that I'm not going to try with a lot of attempts and, words, but I think like it's a counterfactual. And so I don't know if that would have been
that sounds like a law term.
Right. Well, it's just like, it's hard to know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I only know the exact life experiences that have brought me to my moment. But I think like it wasn't hard once it was introduced into my universe, the doing comedy, the whatever, to leave in a way. There was only like one moment, which was specifically when I was like, I had a crush on this improv instructor. This was at this point many years ago. I had taken a class with her and then she wasn't teaching anymore. And I was like, I had a crush on her, but I think it was a little more of like a talent crush. Like, I don't think I wanted to like get married. I just was like, whatever she does is so amazing and she's so fearless and she's so cool. Whatever she would do with me in terms of like, if it's one-on-one improv, tutoring, like whatever, right? And because I come from like, get me a tutor for the SATs, like, whatever it is. And she, I don't think quite knew what to do with that request. But she was like, well, she met with me for coffee and then was like, do you want to do stand up? And I was like, what? No, like I came for tutoring. And then she was like, well, I'll put you on my show. I think you'd be good at it. And I was like, okay. And the only hesitation was that I at first said quickly no, because I was like, that's not what I met with you for. But once she was like, I want you to be on my show, I was like, well, there's a good chance she's going to be there. So I will do that. And then, it went well enough that I thought it went really well. And then sort of the rest was history. I mean, then basically in terms of the business aspects of it, about 11 months after that time, I got a buyout offer that, sort of made this insane idea of leaving tenure a little less insane, basically.
A buyout of your tenure? Is that a thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like early retirement. They're like, hey, we're going to pay you and you leave.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, and it was like the kind of thing where, obviously I can't speak for the organization, the school, but like my best guess at it is like they were going through a financial moment. They're fine now, but like whatever. And the dean at the time was like, okay, we'll do this thing, presumably to get, really like senior faculty kind of out of their offices and off the payroll to a degree anyway. And maybe they want to, pursue other projects. Right. And so anyway, but I don't think that he was thinking, I know that it surprised him, or at least that was the impression I got, because I was like, okay, I picked that one on the phone when he's like describing these things to me, and the buyout packages is what I mean. And he's like, what? Like, that's not the kind of conversation. Like, you don't have to.
You're like, but I want to stay. You're not like arguing. Yeah. You're like, he basically gave you like an endowed chair to be a comedian.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, that's like, the basic gist of what happened. And at that time, I was already like sort of in not necessarily the career, if we want to use that word for it, but I was doing it. Like I had done those first shows with that improv instructor. And then I actually wrote an hour show and performed it in the back of a bar in Chicago. Cause that's the level of delusion that I was operating within, was and I guess maybe other people have their version of it, but after that first set was like, I'm famous. This, I'm amazing at this. I'm going to need an hour and soon. And, it's there's a kind of beautiful, element to that level of delusion that comes at first, because of course, now I look back at it and it's so face palmy. Right. And even, a couple of years, I was just like, oh my God, really, Liz, you thought that? But I think, I don't want to say you, because I don't know what's true for anyone but me, but I really needed that level of delusion at that moment, and I'm glad I had it.
Well, it also goes back to your schooling. You're like, what do I do to get the right answer? And the right answer is to get an hour. So let me just do A plus B equals C right now. Right. And you're like, oh, there's more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, I think yes, that's true. And then it wasn't until, obviously then the gap period, the middle, the murky middle, whatever we want to call it. One, who knows when you're out of it. Number two, you kind of ebb and flow in and out of it depending on where you are with specific material, specific projects. But at that time, I just thought everything was amazing, and I had found, God in this new way sort of feeling. And I was riding very high, a lot of very loud singing in the car from that era. So
do you think lawyers are naturally performers as well? Because they're in the courtroom. Lawyers on TV are performers because I guess they are actors. But I remember doing mock trial, and I loved being the defense. You're out of line. This is happening. Objection. That was so fun.
For sure. Yeah. I think all of that is a very fair question. I was not that kind of lawyer. I was a transactional lawyer. And so I was like sitting at my desk, like being CC'd on emails I didn't understand and, writing contracts and things like that. Or, I mean, at that, like I was a very junior associate by the time I left to teach, but that was the substance of the work that I was starting to do at the firm where I worked. And then teaching, is a little more like, courtroom lawyering, I guess, although I don't know what courtroom lawyering is like because I've never done it. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I was a performer, but it's also like when I look, because I have my second set ever on tape. And I mean, I've been doing some work where I like have me talking to camera, but then cutting with old footage of like very old videos and, sort of cutting back and telling stories in that way. But anyway, I say this because I did a video for a show recently. It was basically like, it was a virtual show. They were doing pre-recorded sets. I was like, okay, if it's pre-recorded, then I can play around and like do some editing. And I saw your tweet of like, yeah, if you want to get a comedy education, like, or if you want to take a comedy class, take one in video editing. You tweeted that, right?
No, yeah, very close. It was,
yes.
If you, people always ask if there's a class to become a comedian, and there is. Yes. It's called video editing.
Yes. Sorry that I didn't mean to mess up the delivery of it, but yes, but I saw that and I liked it because I think about it a lot.
Yeah, we got it all know Premiere and whatever the Apple one is called too, Final Cut. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And so anyway, so it's like a lot of times when I do these pre-recorded sets, I'll kind of play a little bit with and intercut, just because it's like, well, that you can't do if you're just live on Zoom, so why not play? And anyway, I did one. This was a little earlier in the pandemic. It was and it was basically like, okay, well, we're all virtual and everybody laments like how awful it is we have to be virtual, but it's not like live stand-up is always so great. And I had these cuts of me bombing, and one of them was from, I mean, they're not hard to find, but one of them was like from that second set. And it's like interesting because I was like, I was teaching in front of people for 7 years before this set. And it's like, I get that it's not the same. It's not the same. Like, you don't have to land punchlines, but and I was like, good, I think, at teaching. Like, I got an award for it. I got tenure because of it, like, whatever.
That's something.
But I still was, one thought I have, it's almost like more of an acting point than a comedy point. But it's kind of like there's this leeway in being a professor, law or otherwise, where if you're eccentric, it's fine. Like, I remember, it was actually when I was visiting at another law school, that there was a tenured, very famous professor who during faculty meetings would eat salad with dressing on it with his hands. And that was something that he did with other people watching in an official work setting. And it's like a kind of environment where people are like, he's brilliant.
Was it an act, you think? Like,
no, I don't. I think
he's just like, watch how crazy he's just like, his salary keeps going up the more lettuce he eats.
I don't think it's an act. Yes. And I don't know that he gets paid per piece of lettuce he puts into his mouth per leaf by hand. But I think I just mean it as an example of like, I know that every industry may have its version of this. And I'm also not saying that I don't have my own eccentricities. I absolutely do. But I think that there is this way, especially in academia. And again, I think it's law, but also general academia, where it's like, smartest guy, smartest. And a lot of times it is the guys. Not to say that the women aren't weird, because I'm now thinking of like some very questionable wardrobe choices. And again, I'm to talk. I wear sweatpants, like I wear my quarantine outfit the whole life, right? So I'm not saying I'm some fashion icon, but I mean, it's just like, you don't necessarily have to blend a plaid, a paisley, and a rainbow print. Like,
all
you
together,
look like
yeah.
wallpaper. So, you know, but those kinds of things where it's like, it's their professors, you know?
It is
and
cool,
I
like the
think,
people whose wardrobe, like, the pandemic grew into the pandemic caught up with them. Like
oh,
they
yeah,
were already
yeah.
there. But like
I'm a
pandemic's like, oh, we
trendsetter.
see what you're doing.
Right,
Let's
right.
start COVID so that everyone feels comfortable around
Yeah,
you now.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, I think there is something to that academic specifically, like, kind of, okay, we get it. You're very smart.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, comedy, I guess, like, has that, but I feel like in comedy, there's a little more of a rock and roll element to it. Like, oh, yeah, well, that person's going to be, like, really high, or some version
Well, it's like
of
your
that.
brand, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all gonna have a brand, whether we sort
Sure.
of choose it or people
Yeah.
project it onto us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially if it's something that's very obvious and you need to address, um, like you're either gonna lean into it or you're not. You're just gonna be like, I want to
Right.
be independent of what people think visually, or I'm gonna lean into
Yeah.
it more. Like you said, I'm gonna be the weed guy. Like, there's all
Yeah.
these things you can choose or
Sure.
get chosen for you.
Right, right. That's true. Yeah. And I guess, like, just in terms of, you know, how it is, I mean, my worlds are, I guess, like, law practice to a limited extent, law academics to a greater extent, and then comedy and kind of entertainment also to some limited extent.
Yeah. But do you think people
But
know
yeah,
you as the lawyer comedian? Like from afar, I would say no. They just know you as
yeah,
comedian, unless like you tell the
yeah,
story on stage.
right. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's, I feel even like it's nice of you to ask the question, because I'm like, I feel like I could stop the question at, do people know me? Because I don't know that that's, like, true that anyone does. And I think you're right that, like, yeah, my students and my old colleagues know me as the law professor who became a comedian, because that's what they knew. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think I didn't talk about it for years because I wasn't sure how to make it funny. And then I wrote a little bit about it, and I think I did do it on that show that I left my notebook a little bit there, if I'm not mistaken.
Perhaps.
And I had kind of, yeah, I had kind of,
I made a copy. Do you want me to look? Or?
Right. But like,
I'm
yeah,
just doing your whole act. I'm like, lawyers, Chicago.
Right. For sure. Yeah.
Leaving things places they shouldn't be. I don't know.
Yeah. I think, I think I had like a few jokes about it then. And then during the pandemic, I expanded more, I guess, like, in general, but also, like, with respect to that material. Although in, like, the Boston set, because I did the Boston Comedy Festival in December, I did zero of that material. And again, it wasn't like I don't want to, for a substantive reason, to borrow that word from lawyering. But I just didn't. You know, it was like 5-minute sets for the first 2 rounds and 7 minutes for the second, or for the third round rather. And I just didn't have, you know, I guess most of that stuff maybe takes a little longer. I don't know. But like now, you know, I do it more because I do more law schools and like law institutions.
You mean like as a comedic performer, you do those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there I do that stuff because,
to what? Like to decrease enrollment? Like, why do you go to the schools?
No, that's an interesting question. And, you know, the thing is, for me, I mean, you know, prima facie, like at first blush, one might assume.
Explain that.
I did that just to be annoying.
Condescending?
But it just means at first blush.
Okay.
But like at first blush, one might imagine, and very reasonably so, that like, I left, therefore I hated it, therefore, and I'm a comedian, so therefore I'm gonna like rag on it the whole time. And I would say, like, I hate when people say I would say, because it's like you're literally talking, but I did it. But I am saying that I I don't have that perspective as a person. And I think in terms of like the way that I tend to construct bits and kind of my comedic sensibility about things is really not like I hate it and I'm so annoyed in general. And so I guess all of that is to say that like the elements that I find annoying if I'm on like a bit of a rant are less about what was so bad and more about like how people approach me now being an ex-lawyer. Like just, not to do a bit or whatever, but like just to give you a sense is, my wife and I are thinking of buying a house, and like the broker told my wife, like, Liz is really going to want to look at the documents, and people do stuff like that. And I'm like, I know Liz, she doesn't want to go anywhere near the documents. Or like, I was on a Zoom and this guy was like, before a Zoom starts and people are trying to talk and you're just like, I just want to send emails or whatever.
Right.
And so this guy was like, oh, I have a thing to say. And everybody was kind of tuned out. And he then tried to sell it harder. He's like, well, Liz will find it interesting because she was a lawyer. And I'm like, what, Kevin? And then he starts saying this thing about basically it was like how a person I didn't know sued another person I didn't know. And I'm like, do I have standing to sue Kevin for this boring non-story? But like that kind of stuff comes up a lot where I'm just like, I don't really care about like the substance of your legal question for the most part, anyone, but I wasn't negative on the career, or the life. It was more that I just found this other thing that I really loved.
You like more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, as a result, I don't think that the law school shows that I've done, I mean, I was invited back to a school I already did a show at for their admitted students night. Right. And I'm just like, I think that's amazing because that's a lot of confidence that like on your admitted students night, you're having somebody who left the whole thing entirely. But I think it's a result of the fact that it's very true that like I have great respect for the people I met. And, some of the article goes into this, but it's all true, is like, if it wasn't for these instances I had with people I knew in law school, in practice, and then when I was teaching, who clearly loved it in a way that I wanted to love something, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to receive that mirrored back reflection about passion for something. You know what I mean?
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And also, you did graduate. Do you think they'd still invite you if you were a dropout? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like she finished law school, by the way. She found another passion. Maybe she reads comedians' contracts on the side. We don't know, but give it up for Liz.
Yeah, that's true too. Right. And I very much like went all the way with it. It wasn't, I joke about how it's like, well, my parents wanted this and it's true, but it's not like I was in the whole thing for 14 years. If you take from going to law school through all the years I taught and practice, all of it total is 14. That's a long time to be totally not engaged. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
are you saying you were engaged?
I was. Yeah. I mean, especially also like when you're teaching, a lot of teaching is about what you write. Right. Because I was like tenure track and then tenured. So it's very much about publishing. And I would say, it's, there I go again with I would say, but like, it's hard to like write like an 80 to 100 page law review article that you're not deeply engaged in.
Yeah. Because it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of commitment. Right. It's a lot of detail.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even though that's true, the other side of it is also true. Whereas it's like, I think I just mostly like talking about myself and Comedian. Just really, yeah, exactly. But in a way, not to the exclusion of connecting with others. I don't mean that, but in terms of like, when I was writing a law review article, for example, if you go through, and I don't recommend it, all of the stuff that I wrote when I was doing that, there's really a through line that one could see that relates very deeply to my actual life. Like I was dating a woman who was, I have a joke about this, which is my type is a straight girl looking for a reason to break up with her boyfriend. And that was as a result of this relationship I was in. And I wrote this article. It's in the Georgetown Law Journal. It's called Sexual Reorientation. And it's a serious, like, law review article. But the inspiration for it was, I don't understand how this woman likes me. And so how do we think about orientation, and how does it have an effect in law in these discrimination cases in a new way? And how do we want to reframe it? And it's all very academic, but it arose as a result of something that was happening in my love life, basically.
Oh, wild.
And so it's kind of like, that's not so different from constructing a bit. You know, it's just like, okay, well, I noticed a thing that was happening in traffic. And then I started thinking, oh, well, to what extent do other people have similar thoughts, and how am I going to construct it, and what's the wording and whatever. It's obviously different, but there are aspects of it that are similar. But I think that, like, the disconnect, or the way that I see a difference between the two pursuits, is ultimately when you're writing a law review article, it's like, okay, so what should judges do differently? What should academics be teaching differently? Like, something has to change in terms of what you're proposing, because that's the nature of the medium. And I suppose we could think about, like, well, you know, in a bit, are you in fact asking your audience to change their thinking? And I think the answer on that is, to some degree, yes. Yeah. But mostly, it's not like you leave a comedy show and you're like, great, now we know what we're going to do. You know, we're going to petition for the, and sure, yes, of course, like, there's bits that do that, and there's social change that's furthered as a result of somebody seeing the world differently, as a result of listening and laughing with understanding and resonance, of course. But I think, like, it's not like you've got that expectation when you're thinking about, you know, how you don't like to have road rage and instead you enjoy singing, or, you know, whatever it is. Like,
how many pages was this article about?
Well, that one specifically, I think it was about 80, but then what happened with that one was it generated a mini symposium with 3 responses in the centennial edition of the Georgetown Law Journal. And so then
it's like being heckled.
Yeah, well, it's an honor in that situation.
So it's being heckled.
Right, I guess that's true. And then I wrote a response. And so I think the response was maybe like another 10-ish pages. So maybe like 90-ish pages. But that's just one article.
You're like an academic comedian. You're like, at some point you're like, wait a minute, I could do this whole 80 pages in 3 lines. Like, let me, give me a mic. Give me a mic.
Right. That's funny. Yeah. And, so, you know, it's different and the same. But what I was saying with that is just like, I think it's hard, you know, yes, it's true that I ultimately left because I liked this more, but it's not like I wasn't into it when I was doing it, you know?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I was into music, I was into finance, and then just other thing comes along, you're like, oh, this is even better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing, you know, in your story, from what I'm hearing and from what I know, which isn't a lot, but like, you, I think, seem also like pretty kind of open to it and positive about it. And you're like, oh, cool. Like, and you created this, you know, these amazing shows and your own things within comedy, I think, like this podcast included, because maybe of your attitude about it. You know what I mean? That it's like, I don't know.
I would say that's correct. And also just like, I guess I came from a entertainment background. So I was like, I got a lot of the, like, I guess the beginner syndrome out of the way in my music phase of it. So I already knew how to navigate. And I was like, okay, this will work. This won't. Let's try this. And also like you, I think we're the same age. And
yeah, I'm 41.
Same. So we both started late.
Yeah.
Relative to most comedians.
Sure.
So I started in my 30s, but I was like, now, how do I like catch up? So I was like looking for ways like to kind of, what I said, like put jet fuel on it, like starting a great show or doing the podcast or just like diving in and trying lots of things to kind of like accelerate it in a way to make up for lost time. Because then, like, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but I catch myself feeling this way, which maybe is not a good thought, but it's like, do I have enough time left to really do comedy?
For sure. And I thank you for sharing that with me, because I know that that's like, I consider that a vulnerable thought. And yes, for sure, I definitely have those moments. For me, I think I equally have moments, and I've had to kind of reorient some of this thinking too, which is, so when I was teaching, I started teaching at 27 years old. I was tenured on, not in any sort of accelerated way, just the 6-year clock. So 33 years old, I was tenured. And so that was pretty early. You know, I guess 33 is whatever, but I mean, it's Jesus year, but like, you know, I'm not saying that's old or young. I think 27
Hold on, I gotta mark this as the point. She compares herself to Jesus. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Right. She did it. Yeah. So she has risen, but I think 27, to me at least, sounds really young, right? Like that's that's like a kid. And so I started teaching when I was very young, and as a result, and also what happened was, like, I had my first publication, had this kind of like home run. I'm not saying it, you know, it was or wasn't a home run, but in terms of like, it got also like a bunch of attention. It was a very good placement. And it was this kind of thing where, you know, sort of like, oh, wow, look at this beginner, you know, strutting kind of thing. And I mean, I had a lot of like psychological backlash in my own brain and inner turmoil as a result of some of that element to my early beginnings as a law professor, to the tune of, you know, yes, imposter syndrome. Yes, am I gonna, you know, do something as great as the first article, like all of that stuff. But it was all very fast, you know?
Do you feel like you were always the youngest, like around?
Then
like,
I did.
Yeah.
Then I did.
Yeah.
I mean,
same. In my first career, I always felt I was the youngest person around.
Right.
And then you feel that that's always going to be the case. And then when you switch to something else, you're not anymore. And that's also a weird feeling.
Yes, I totally relate to that. Yeah, I remember when I first started, it didn't last long, which was fun also, because then I had like more friends. But I think I was 11 years younger than the next person who was older than me on the faculty. And so anyway, that's whatever. But and also, like, I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm like 90% sure of that, because I don't know where the stat would come from in my brain otherwise.
Right.
But anyway,
I like how lawyers are always like, just catch. It's just in case we get sued later for my percentage. It may not be. Well, I don't know.
I appreciate precision and honesty, and I just try for it as best I can. So, you know, I come from that background of not even just lawyering, but like also as an academic, it's like everything you say has like 10 footnotes to it. And the goal, at least, is to show, how do you know this, you know, and that's what's very important to me. So anyway,
did that help you? Because like, I'm sure the loopholes of like getting something in the Georgetown Law Review, you're like editing and like having the skills to navigate that when it comes, did that help you get the article with Wall Street Journal? You're like, oh, I can do that.
Oh. No, I mean, the very short answer to that question is no, because it just happened in a different way.
Okay.
That was, I mean, the way like, this is what happened for the Wall Street Journal was my best friend and roommate, like after law school, who I'm still in touch with, is a mom at the same school as the woman who wrote the article. And the woman who wrote the article, Lauren Meckling, who's a brilliant writer and person who I've come to know through the article, basically, you know, was asking her friends, like, does anyone know anyone who had this kind of story? Because I guess she had done like a couple of other similarly themed pieces for the journal. And so then my friend Courtney said my name right away, because she knows me as the law professor who turned into a comedian. So that was how that happened.
It's more of a Hollywood path than a lawyering path. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. So all you have to do is go to law school, have a friend who has a kid in the same school.
You kind of figured out both methods. You found the lawyering way, which is hard work, and the Hollywood way, which is who you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, yes, sure. And I like, I mean, yes, you're right. but what I was saying before in terms of what you said about like trying to, find ways due to your experience and build on your experience in your first career and kind of iteration of self or whatever in order to then have something in this career. Do you have the time also? I know that's such an annoying thing to ask.
It's 11:44.
Okay, good. Okay, great.
Do you have a hard out, as they say in Hollywood?
Yes, I do for my 3 o'clock. So at the hour.
Okay.
But I'm sorry. And also, like, I'm sorry for being sorry. Like, whenever people are like, were you born a lesbian? I'm like, I'm not sure, but I know that I was born sorry. So in that way, I am also like, Jesus, here I am for your sins. But anyway, okay. So I think you're right. And I really relate to that element of like trying to think, okay, well, what did I do in, whatever I did before, finance, lawyering, for both of us. And how do I bring it to bear in this new in pursuit? But I think what I also have had is a little bit the opposite, which is like, okay, well, in that career, I was like this kind of dynamo, like, very young. I'm not saying I was a prodigy, but I feel like
come on, prodigy. Let's say it.
It's just like
you did Jesus. You can do prodigy.
Okay, I'm never
She's
going
a prodigy.
to listen to this podcast.
The title of this podcast is Liz Glazer, the prodigy.
Oh my God. But I think that because like being a young person and maybe you can relate to this, like other people make fun of you for that. It's just like you're 27, like, hey, professor, that kind of thing. Okay. And I was like, that's cool. And I'm like happy I did it. And I get why it's prestigious, but I don't want success in this new thing before I feel prepared, before I feel like the roots and the ground underneath me, and I feel like I have the skill set. And I think it, by the way...
And you mean comedy, just to be clear? Yeah. You're talking about comedy now?
In comedy, right. And acting and writing, like anything that's in entertainment, I'm just like, I want to earn it. I don't want to feel that same thing. Because when I wrote my first article, I'm not saying it wasn't good or whatever, or that it was that good. Like, it was just the thing I wrote. And then it had this reception, because I was prepared. Everyone was like, your first article, it'll get published by the Who Cares Law Review. Nobody's going to read it, but you have to do it. And I was like, okay, fine. And then that didn't happen. And what happened was this like kind of big deal for me at the time. And also a big deal, like, because, in terms of law review publication, one thing that maybe it's helpful to understand is you're competing with every law professor who's sending stuff out at the exact same time, because it's like pilot season.
It's like JFL.
It's like everybody. What's that?
It's like JFL.
Yes, exactly right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're competing with everybody. And so the idea that I got this placement is just like, that means I was competing with the people who teach at the school that law review is from, all of the people who are faculty at Harvard and Yale and NYU and Columbia. And I'm just this like scrappy, professor at wherever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so all of this to say that like, yes, I hear you in terms of wanting to kind of, okay, well, this is how I was good at my other life. And so I can be an older person and a smarter person, a wiser person, and a more, savvy person in this new life. But I also sort of put the brakes on that a bit for myself, because I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not saying that anybody was giving it to me, but I really was conscious of it, that I was like, I don't want, to figure out the fastest way to get new faces or the fastest way to get a late night set. I want it when it makes sense for me to have it.
Isn't that the good thing about comedy, though? It's like, I think they asked Seinfeld one time, like in an interview, like, what's the shortcut? And they're like, there is no shortcut. You just have to do the work.
Right. Yeah. And there is definitely a beauty to that, because it's like, I guess also this is related. It sounds like I was saying two sentences at once, and I was, but I really, I guess, like, when I say that I chose this because the honesty of it was appealing to me most, I really mean that. And I don't mean honesty in the sense like I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, although fine. Right. I mean, it's what Jesus would do.
Internal honesty, yeah.
Right. But it's also like, I want that anything that I say, yes, I want it to get the laugh. Yes, of course I want to get on TV. Yes, of course I want to make a lot of money and have whatever success. And I want my mom to show off about me to her, bereavement group or her sisterhood friends or whoever. But also every group, mommy. But also, I want to see that set, whatever, that accomplishment, and be like, yep, that's me. That's what I meant. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It is.
And there's no shortcut to that.
Yeah, there's no shortcut to feeling proud about the work and feeling proud that you were ready. Because it's kind of like you're going to get your shot, and it sucks when you're like, I was only 80% as good as I needed to be. But also, like, you can't control when you get the shot. So sometimes the shot makes you better. You're like, this thing I got next month, it's such a big deal, and it pushes you to go to the next level. So it's kind of like both things squeezing you all the time.
I think that's a really smart way to visualize it. I think it's really true. And, before I was talking to you today, I was thinking, like, I remember knowing of your podcast, and I know that I know you. I know we were friends and are friends.
I did your show with Josh Edelman.
Oh yeah, exactly.
When you were still in LA, right? I think you left, right?
Yeah. Then I was, but it's like there's also, when a friend comes to a thing and you're like, oh, Latif's doing this stuff, it's cool, and it's like, well, I want to do it, but then it's also like, and I didn't ask you ever to be on this podcast, but like, it definitely has crossed my mind in my consciousness of you having a podcast, and I say that like just to kind of bring the point home of like, there's never a thing, especially somebody who's ambitious, which I consider myself to be, and in the way that we're talking about, that it's like, well, in order to get where you got in finance, you had to be bold and send some letters and take a shot. And it's like, when is it the time to do that? And when is it the time to be like, you know what, Latif will call me. He has my number. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. And it's not like if I was on, this or that show today, that it would necessarily be the best. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like,
There's no good answer for that. That's a very typical like show business question. Like, should I email this agent? Should I ask for this thing? And there's a lot of like post gaming of it. It's like, oh yeah, when you ask for it and you get it and it works out, you're like, yeah, I'm so glad I asked. But then when you ask and they ghost you or it doesn't work out, you're like, why did I ask? Like So you like, there's never like a good path, but there is like a medium, like a Cinderella line in there where it's like, you're not asking, you're not being annoying, you're just being real, but you're not too far in the cut. There's a balance. And like, I think we all have like an internal gauge. Well, maybe not all of us, but like for asking for things, we're like, okay, it feels right. It feels like a good.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I'm glad that we're talking about it, because I feel like in terms of topics that I've heard people chatting about on, comedy podcasts, show business podcasts, like that's such a thing. Yeah. And I have bad stories too,
Oh yeah, like, we all do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't mean to be cryptic, because that's a thing that I don't like about, if somebody's going to say something, but like, I mean, I made a video about the time that the ghost of Joan Rivers borrowed my car. And that's, I mean, I can link it to you if you want for notes or whatever.
Put it in the comments.
Sure. And I'm not, I mean, I like it a lot, but I mean it because it's a story about that, when the ghost of Joan Rivers borrowed my car, which of course is a claim that is mine alone. But it arose as a result of my ambition. And when I first started comedy, I'm like, I'm going to need a mentor. Okay, Joan Rivers is going to be my mentor. And basically started with me being like, I got to see her. I got to meet her. I got to, and it was so much this, and this is like, when was this? 2013. And so it was basically right when I started, and I was just like, okay, this is the thing. This is what I'm going to do. I need an hour. I need a mentor. And now I feel like I'm much more, I mean, I get amped as a person and in performance and stuff, but I think in terms of that, like I'm actually looking at something on my wall right now that says slow down, which is a thing that I remind myself of. It's mostly for like literal acting. just like you don't have to say the words the fastest kind of thing. But I think more broadly, there is that it's like you're saying, it is that kind of Cinderella, three bears, sort of thing of like, there is this.
Don't drag the bears into this. Come on.
Yeah. But like that kind of just right, middle ground.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's hard to know it until, at least in my case, the way that I learn most things is I wildly mess up. And then I'm like, oh, not that.
Yeah. It's like, it's the same. A lot of our life is like, we feel good about the one history that played out. It's kind of like, I mean, you could say it even with like investing or gambling or Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, you're a genius if it works out, and you're not if it doesn't. But like, which history played out? You know? For the people who didn't buy Bitcoin at $1 or whatever it was, like, you feel like an idiot. But you could have also blown all your money.
Right.
This one history played out, and that's what you're judging yourself on, where there's like a probability of things working out. And like,
for sure.
Did you make the best decision with all available information at the time, which is all you can really do?
For sure. And I guess like, I just think a lot about kind of like the moments of my life and how I would like to spend the moments of my life. And I think like, sure, there's a lot of ways to view success, financially, happiness, whatever. But it's kind of like, if I'm spending the most number of minutes of my day engaged in the ways that I want to be engaged, and I can focus on, in terms of progress, thinking about how many of my minutes are spent that way. And then once I've got a certain percentage that I'm reasonably happy with, thinking, okay, well, now I think I need to make some money. And so let me think about the like, I used to focus on how many shows do I have in a month?
Yeah, we all did. Yeah.
Right. And then
until the pandemic, which kind of changed, put that back into perspective. Like, there's no more flyers. Like, here's my dates.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I don't do those anymore, but they're what?
Well, I'm actually making one, but that's neither here nor there.
Oh, that's great.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Yeah. But I think it's also like, then it can graduate to like, okay, well, how many paid shows am I doing? And also, but it's like,
didn't you say one time, like, I'm making a pointed effort to be a paid comedian?
Yeah, there was one, I know what you're talking about. And it was this one flyer. I did flyers every month.
Yeah.
And then there was one flyer, I think it was April 2019, that it just happened that like 50% of the dates were paid. And also that I was able to pay all of my like monthly expenses from the money that I was earning. And like, I mean, I like to be very open book.
Yeah. I think about that post all the time. I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was such a good one. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I really do try. Like when I won Boston, one of the things I was really adamant about, not that there was anybody who was like, don't do it, but I'm a lawyer, so I live with that person inside of me. It's my dad. But like, I think about, like I think about how I was rejected entirely from the festival 1 year ago,
right.
So, and when I won, I was like, well, sure, it makes sense to post about winning, because like, we got to show off on the internet. That's what it's for. Right. And cats. But like, I want to also, if somebody's like looking at my post because they're, for 5 minutes, I'm mildly known within a comedian community, and I could possibly inspire someone who feels like crap because they didn't get in. I can know that feeling, and I can share, like, I know the feeling of, ugh, I'm not good enough. What do I have to do? All that stuff. And I'm not saying you're going to win next year, but it's at least possible. It was done literally this year.
You did it. Yeah. You kept trying. And it's also like, it's not, you didn't take it personal. It's never personal.
For sure.
It's just a thing. You've run shows. Like, how many times do you get like 100 more comedians asking than you can book? It's not personal.
Right.
It's just like, I got to make a show. We're just doing something else here. We're casting.
Well, I think that you're amazing in that way specifically, because I think like, I don't know you that well, but I know you a little bit. And from what I can understand of you, and I think it's such a attractive quality, there's very much of like, sort of water off a duck's back, kind of like, we're just rolling. We're making a show. This is the business of it. This is the podcast. Like, it's not personal. And I'm like, you seem like a happy guy.
It's hard to not, it takes work to not take it personally. And also it's like, you constantly have people who are like, you know, some people get upset and some people don't. And it's just, it's never personal.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one? I know you have to go, but I want to ask you.
No, it's okay. It's a 3:20, but I should sign on at 3:05 for me.
So this will be the final question then.
Yes, please.
And I don't know how, I'm sorry to do it to you, but it's going to be a slightly lawyer question.
Oh, okay, cool.
I submit to those New Yorker cartoons, like the caption. So I wrote one last week, and it goes, and my exact caption is selected, but it says a different name.
Really?
Like word for word. And so I emailed them. I'm like happy and pissed. I'm like, okay, well, what I wrote was what was selected, but I was like, obviously someone else wrote the same thing. So I'm like,
and they didn't write back to you?
Well, I mean, how do you choose? Like, who wrote the same thing? Am I overreacting, or is that kind of like fucked?
No, I don't think you're overreacting, but I mean, I would think that somebody wrote it and they opened that email first.
But I need an explanation, because like, but that means they don't read all of them, because that means, you know, they just stop and they're like, oh, we got the one, we're done.
Yeah. I think that they could. Because they're certainly,
I guess this has nothing to do with lawyering.
Well, it does, in the sense that it's like, you know, it's your property, your intellectual property, because you wrote it. But that's my guess, is that this is what happened. In terms of their getting back to you with an answer about it, you know, I don't know that there's a way for sure that you would, but you already emailed them?
They said they're looking into my email.
Okay, good. Yeah, can you keep me posted? I'm so interested.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to post it on Instagram anyway, which is what I do anyway. I'm like, I wrote this, someone else got, and you know what it is? It's so triggering for me, because so much of music business, your name gets left off of stuff.
Sure.
And I'm like, it just takes me back to all the things I hated about like doing a project, and you open the CD and your name's not on it. You're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, from a lawyer perspective,
it's actually not a lawyer. It's more of but you're a writer, a comedian. It was more of a sharing. And unless you're like, I know this so-and-so, let me talk to them.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I'm happy to know it, and I want to know what happens with it. So I hope that there's like a series of posts and a bit and whatever that I will be able to follow along with the story itself, which is really my main interest.
Oh yeah, it could turn into a bit if nothing else.
Yeah, or whatever it becomes, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. Well, Liz, this has been great. I really appreciate you. Thanks for doing it. I feel like we could do another hour. Can we do it again? Like I only got through half my list, so.
Oh my God. Yeah. Anytime.
We'll do it
again.
And
I'm sorry that I have to go. It's not.
Tell the people your socials before you take off.
Yeah. Okay. I'm at Liz Glazer on Instagram, at Elizabeth Glazer on Twitter, and www.dearlizglazer.com. Where you can email me or whatever you want.
Follow her. Love her. If you're in law school, don't drop out. Talk to you later.
Don't drop out. I might come to your school and do a set.
Yeah, let her come perform, though. That would be great. All right, take care.
What did you say?
Let you come perform.
Yes, exactly.
That would be great.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.
Okay, Latif, thank you. Okay.